For the last 15 years, I've been on a quest to discover the DNA of the most successful digital leaders in the world. What makes them tick, what's in their minds and in their hearts. We are sharing deep insights from our world-class CIOs so that you get inspired, can learn and reach your full potential as a digital leader. If you are an ambitious technology executive, then I invite you to join CIONET. Join our community so that you too can realize your ambition.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thanks for joining us for another edition of CIONET Spotlight, where each week we put a digital leader somewhere in the world in the proverbial spotlight, in a polite way, of course. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Sandeep Mehta. Sandeep has recently joined the Hartford as Group CTO. For those not familiar with the Hartford, 200-plus-year-old company, about 22 billion US in revenue and about 20,000 employees. I always like to throw out a bit of trivia or fun fact. 1835, giant fire in the financial district of New York. It destroyed most of Wall Street, which was already thriving in the early 1830s. And the then CEO personally funded all of that rebuilding, which I just find a remarkable little story in history. We're not going to focus too much on the Hartford today. I've talked with Sandeep about it, and he's new to the role. He'll make some comments, but he's had such a wonderful career and a wide-ranging career, both domestically and internationally. There'll be plenty to talk about in the next 30 minutes. Undergrad in physics, then went and got a master's in computer science and quick chronological history. Started out at Philips, then went over to Verizon. Long career in different parts of banking: Lehman Brothers, Deutsche Bank, Goldman Sachs, UBS, Wells Fargo, and now the Hartford. If you look at his background, beautiful view of Zurich, which was from his former home there at whilst he was at UBS. Also, Sandeep has had a number of advisory roles with tech companies, CIO advisory roles. Blue Coat, laterally acquired by Symantec. Actian, which is a very large, now public company. I think it's been around 40 years or so, in the Cast, which is a US French company. And then lastly, an advisor to a well-known venture firm, Bionomu Global Ventures. Eric Bionomu was the co-founder of 3Com. So very, very complete resume there, Sandeep. What did I leave off?
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for the welcome. No, you didn't leave anything off. Yes, I've joined the Hartford recently, but a long career in banking, but always tech is top of mind for me.
And that career in banking, a lot of that is very international. You lived in Zurich. I know at Wells Fargo, you were the international CIO. Banking, by definition, is quite international. I suspect all those roles had some flavor of international in them.
That's true. And aside from living abroad for 11 years, I most recently was traveling back and forth to India and the Philippines. So even though there are global roles, sometimes when we got on planes, it was very much a in-person type of role where the engagement is always better when we are in person. We had to evolve in the pandemic to learn to adapt to doing remote work and dealing with colleagues and teams remotely, especially across time zones, but there's always room to learn.
You know, I was going to save that for later in our chat. 30 minutes goes quick, but let's flip that around. The future of work. And it's a big topic. We see headlines every day. It looks like we're kind of emerging out of the last 18 months. Now we got to worry about the Delta variant. It seems to be heating up in parts of Europe, and of course India. But what do you think is really going to happen for this future of work? You mentioned we're on planes all the time. people are starting to talk about the hybrid, and maybe we'll come in and work a couple of days and out. I'll share a view, and then you can tell me what you're thinking. My view is the 20-somethings and the 30-somethings, our future workforce, they want to live in urban areas. They want to meet other people. They want to socialize. They're trying to find a life partner, and they don't want to work on their into their bed for the next 20 years. That's not a career. And to that, I'm seeing large companies around the world saying, "Hey, this little experiment's over. I need you back in the office." In financial services, we've seen Goldman Sachs make those statements. We've seen Credit Suisse make statements like that. Of course, Citi. Do you think that 2022 is going to look a lot more like 2020 or 2019?
So, Mark, that's a really good question. I don't think that it's the kind of the future is totally set. The one thing that is emerged is that the acknowledgement and awareness that the type of work we do, the modalities we work in, is quite fluid, even in the tech sector or in a heavily tech dependent industry. So, leaving aside manufacturing and transportation or things that are inevitably physical in nature that require plants, factories, pipelines, refineries, etc. For the rest of the workforce, the modality of work for different people at different times changes. So acknowledging that as we design future work is going to be very important. So say a company was partially remote full-time anyway and partially flexible for the rest of the organization, keeping that and changing it as the needs of the business change, that's going to be important. So if there were a mix of hybrid, remote, full-time in person, based on the feedback, taking equity, the modality of work, technology, commuting, talent, all of those factors, health, public health, all those factors go in. And ultimately, judgment plays a big part of it. So having that flexibility to organize the best way teams can organize. When they need to come in person, they get together in person. If the team is geographically split, maybe some people can travel. Not everyone can travel. And a lot of that will depend on personal choice and public health. But the tools do help overcome a lot of barriers.
You rattled off a lot of variables to think about. We'll have to go back and probably re-listen to those. I think those are very good. There's just something about the serendipitous nature of face-to-face work that I think after 18 months of trying, nobody's been able to repeat on a Zoom call, right? You bump into the colleague and you can have a 5-minute hallway chat, or you can go grab lunch, or go grab dinner, or you how do you get promoted? How do you get a little FaceTime with the boss? There's just this serendipitous nature of being co-located. And my concern is we try to come up with some type of way of working in light of the last 18 months, and those softer things, the serendipitous nature of work is the things I'm watching for. Do you see that as well as a variable?
I think you raise very good points, and I think all of us are learning. I would say two things to me stand out. Adaptability is going to be key, and that attribute in people, whether they are leaders or part of teams, adapting to a new model of working, a new model of collaborating, a new way of communicating is going to be very, very important. And the second part that I think is equally important is that the modes like the coffee tape or the coffee machine or water cooler chat can morph into alternate methods. I mean, I've been in situations where I'm time zones away and many weeks away from my next flight to a foreign location, and yet I'm able to maintain a relationship. It doesn't have to be always with the camera on. In fact, psychologists have called out Zoom fatigue and acknowledged that if you have a prior relationship with someone, you're able to focus better if the camera is off. So people should not hesitate to turn the camera off when they are not comfortable or not able to focus. But I think adaptability is very, very key. And then embracing tools, that's an important aspect. Like a simple thing like no one is going to mandate that people keep cameras on, but people who do choose to be visual and interactive are finding value. Using chat, using whiteboards, sharing through other means is important, but I think this is an evolutionary journey, and we are at the beginning of it.
That's great. Let's. I want to dive into the technology a little bit, given your vast experience and the advisory roles you've been playing at Blue Coat and Actian in the cyber security and data analysis space, big data space. Accordingly, how do you frame on the security side that Blue Coat acquisition? I think it was $6 billion, if I'm doing it off of memory, but it was quite large at the time. What are the big security problems that still aren't solved? When you look at it, is this still bad actor stuff? Is the economics are still there that we've got the standard attacks and it's asymmetrical information? Are there still big threats out there that we're going to see technology solutions to, or is it just trying to keep up with the social engineering stuff? So how do you even frame that? How do you think about that? How do you teach your teams? You'll be teaching them soon at Hartford, but prior at Wells Fargo and UBS elsewhere. How do you even think about the security landscape? A few thousand vendors, and obviously it's high profile, even more so now with the pandemic.
That's actually a very important theme around executive and boardrooms in all companies. I think it's safe to say that the bar got raised. If, regardless of whether you're complying or monitoring or baselining, if say 95 or 98% was acceptable, now it's 100%. The visibility to the executive and the boardroom is even higher. So for CISOs, CTOs, CIOs, etc., that awareness is very important. The industry itself went through, I think, a journey to try to shift away from thinking of just the perimeter to defense in depth. And a big part of that defense in depth strategy is, you can say, user education or staff education or executive education or customer education, be it phishing, be it ransomware, or any other threat or threat actor. I think that awareness and education folds into defense in depth. And we've got a NIST framework and other frameworks. Those are good theory, but the importance, I think, of defense in depth is to have a continuous improvement mindset, to constantly baseline and rebaseline and monitor, and then fold in the observations and learnings to defense in depth. I think the regulators in some countries are highly aware. In some countries, they are fast followers. But the last thing people want is to have the regulator tell them, in a regulated industry like finance, is that they are not meeting the bar. It's better to be proactive about defense than reactive. And this is especially true with APT and big threat actors that are state sponsored.
What is the root cause here? And I've been thinking about this for a decade, but are we writing, is it effectively, our computer systems and our networks are, they're not holistically designed, but it's piecemeal by hundreds of vendors? Is it we have insecure OSs and insecure networks, and that combined with social engineering is allowing these attacks to routinely appear? But if you look at root cause analysis, it strikes me that we do have after an aftermarket industry called the security industry that's, putting fingers in dikes of, insecure networks, insecure OSs, and then you put the social layer on top. Is that would you? Is that the root
I
of the
think there's
problem?
a number of different factors here that so we should unpack it. I'll say at the outset, it's actually a quote from a friend of mine who says we should not confuse making products secure from security products, because every company buys a lot of security products, but frequently those tools will get used and then go on the shelf. So thinking about making one's products secure is fundamental. I think software by its nature is prone to errors, including security. And in certain industries, the cost of those errors is very, very high. And, healthcare and military uses, for one, the consequences of things going bad is very, very high. So, short of having automated, proven, mathematically proven, secure software, all we can do is to continuously manage, monitor, and improve. So whether it's security controls or software testing or both testing and monitoring or using modern verification tools and responding very, very quickly to errors and threats, or it is making sure that you cannot 100% guarantee, but if you try to make sure that you have absolute correctness and security, would have very slow velocity. And in this era of agile software, velocity and deployment frequency end up trumping security, and you kind of fix it later. I think because the bar went up, the fix it later mentality cannot do. And that's where technology, along with education, plays a key role in my mind.
And as you mentioned, just last on this theme, this has board attention. They know it. This is every public company and private, mind you, but every large public company is talking about this. They're calling in the CTO, they're calling in the CIO, and they're saying, what's the plan? What's our exposure? What are we proactively doing? And this, in most large companies, financial services included, is taking a front seat now.
Absolutely. And so that attention is important to get the sponsorship, to reduce the threat surface, to mitigate any actions, to invest in the right kind of monitoring tools, in trying to change user and customer behavior. Simple example, like blocking access to certain sites, blocking access to personal email. When I started my career, it was unheard of. Then it became prevalent. Then it became mandated, at least in the finance industry. And no one asked, why are we doing this? I think that evolution has to be gone through in other areas of technology, software development, engineering, deployment, all of those areas.
That's great. Let's switch gears and look forward. You're a very accomplished CTO. You've worked all around the world, as you said, more than a decade of that abroad. What are the opportunities? What broadly in financial services, what are you keeping your eyes on, in the next 3 to 5 years? What are the big game changers? Is it ML and AI? Is it RPA? Is it, more big data? Is it user experience? What really is going on in financial services broadly, where CTOs are going to get the most bang for the buck, are really going to be able to impact and change the business, either take more costs out from some of those technologies, or in fact to get into new lines of business. The more they're digitized, the more data they're spinning off, the more they can monetize that data. Where are the big swings as you see them going forward?
No, that's great. So what I would say is this, Mark. Digital itself is not new. We got personal computers in 1985. So the difference in the current wave of evolution, in my mind, is high degree of customer awareness, especially of the journey that they're on when they want to conduct, say, a transaction. So speaking of banking, what is the customer journey if they're trying to make a big purchase or take out a loan or buy a house, etc., or plan for retirement, etc.? Those have to be reflected in the customer journey. So your development teams, your design teams, your UX and CX teams have to go on the same journey, because the customer's voice or their experience has to be reflected in user stories and feature functionality, etc. I think once that acknowledgement is there, bringing all the whole array of tools we have, AI, ML, RPA, low-code tools, cloud enablement, CI/CD, DevOps, pipelines, and automation, all of those can be brought to bear. But I think it's what end goal are we aiming for? What are we designing for? If it is eliminating paper, let's say, in a mortgage process, and we design an RPA automation framework that simply replicates a paper process with bots without process simplification, that complexity will kill you. Automation will not solve your complexity problem. In fact, if you're in a regulated business, it basically makes the audit job even harder, because you have bots that are potentially black boxes. And if you cannot explain why they did what they did to make a certain decision, it's not going to be very attractive when you are either being audited or talking to a regulator to say, we have all these black boxes. So if we go with a purpose, use all the tools. I mean, I started off my career in AI, so I'm absolutely the first one to embrace AI, but it's really a case of expanding the boundaries of the art of the possible, reflect the customer journey, and then bring the right tool in the right way to solve the customer problem in any industry.
It sounds like a theoretical question. It's not. How much of this is evolutionary versus revolutionary? And the follow-up question is, how much can you really do revolutionary in a big, complex company with, different stakeholders and different agendas, and a focus on the short term because you're, the financial pressure. What the question here is, can you only do the evolutionary stuff in a very large company, or can you pivot into new lines of business under that domain? Can you go build, new billion-dollar businesses, new multi-billion-dollar businesses inside that core business? Have you seen it successfully done, or is this just one big slow, evolutionary process where you're continually evolving the portfolio of technology to move the business? That's a never-ending process. There is no finish line, but you're just evolving it. Or, hey, we've got to fundamentally change and start a new line of business, and that's hard to do. That revolutionary stuff is hard to do inside of a multi-billion-dollar business that has a lot of complexity, a lot of systems, and has certain ways of doing things.
Oh, that's a great topic, and a deep debate can be had. I will share my experience, which is it's a bit of both macro and micro. So I'd say overall in technology, in financial services and other industries, the macro is evolutionary. But within the macro envelope, there's lots of revolutionary opportunities. So let's take the pandemic, for example. As someone who moved recently, I was actually quite amazed at how video and mobile apps are enabling things that required a person in your home, for example. So the overall envelope is evolutionary, but once the technology matures, it is dramatic how it can be brought to bear to solve a particular problem or a sub-problem. And that seems revolutionary at that moment in time. But eventually, the kind of boundary expectations will change. You do a small thing that may be revolutionary, but then the expectations go up.
Right.
Nobody would ever go back to pre-pandemic ways of doing certain things that are so easy. It's one touch, it's mobile enabled, and probably has quite a bit of algorithmic capability behind it.
And just to follow up on that, in my conversations with boards and leadership teams in some of the world's largest financial services groups, to add what you're saying, they've got a balance sheet. The fintechs don't. They feel that they are still fundamental to financial services for a very long time. That the arbitrage, effectively the small stuff that fintechs are doing, with few exceptions, without a balance sheet, without the maturity of processes, without being able to, take on risk, real risk, systemic risk that, fintechs really can't touch the multi-billion-dollar players across the FS and insurance landscape. Agree? Disagree?
I think it's not quite black and white. I think fintechs have a role to play. I think the big financials are learning and developing rapidly. So it's a hybrid model. Partnerships are very important. Many banks have seed funds or accelerators and embrace fintechs or partner with them. But it's very much customer driven. So if you take wealth advice and robo advisors, in the beginning they were minnows, but now all the big players, whether they are banks or brokers like Fidelity, are embracing that technology. Are they building it? Some are. Are they buying it? Some are. Are they doing a bit of both? So the balance sheet is not a enabler or a disabler. It depends on the problem you're solving. Buying a robo-advisor may not get you more assets under management. It'll give you technology capability. And so it's important to acknowledge and differentiate that.
Very, very well said. I had a conversation a few years ago in Zurich on this very topic with one of your former employers. So the group CIO and his team, we had this very chat. So they're buying, they're building, but it's technology at the end of the day, and it may not get them more AUM. So well stated. Sandeep, 30 minutes comes by pretty quick, and we're coming up to the bottom of the hour. And I always, as you know, in these interviews with one final question. And the question is a takeaway. What would you tell your younger self? What's the bit of advice that's served your career very well that you want to pass on to other digital leaders? This is being, streamed out to social media. There's a lot of younger, up and coming digital leaders listening. What would you tell them? What's the nugget? What's in your pocket that you always pull out? It always works to get results.
Great question. I would say, Mark, that I personally lean towards take risk early in your career. Absolutely, whether it's adventure a person seeks or opportunities or both at the same time. But every one of those is a learning experience. There are no bad experiences. You learn from every experience. But most of all, what I have learned from my experience is adaptability, which I mentioned earlier. So go into those experiences, whether it be geographical or cross-industry or even joining a new industry in and out of technology, whatever may suit one's personal journey, being adaptable and embracing that adventure, it's always good learning. And eventually people kind of find their groove that they want to be with. I was very truly lucky to be passionate about technology from the very beginning. My first job was in a physics lab, but I knew that tech was the enabler. And it's been that way for a very long time, 30 years since college. And I'm happy to say that embracing my advice and learning all along the way, one can never stop learning. So that's what I would share with someone else.
Just wonderful. Sandeep, thank you so much on behalf of CIONET and our 10,000 members globally. Wonderful wisdom and words of advice today. Really appreciate you making the time. So thanks so much for all of our regular listeners. Same time next week. In fact, we have all summer now booked. We've got a very full schedule of other digital leaders from different industries around the world. So Sandeep, thank you so much, and we'll be in touch.
Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Right, take care.